I think one of the most valuable things you can have as an expat is self-awareness. So to be able to look inward and assess why you're feeling the way you do and that kind of thing.
It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. And I'm your host, Sean. This week's guest is another podcaster living in Germany who hosts the show called The Expat Experience. And we had a great discussion, and I'll get to her in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you this. Someone named Rachel on Facebook recommended the Germany Experience page, and she wrote this. I'm loving the podcast. I've been binge listening it the last few days at work. Great work, Sean. Rachel, thank you so much for the kind words. I hope I haven't been distracting you from your work. I'm just saying that. I don't care if I did or didn't. I'm glad you're listening to the show. That's all I care. Yeah. You know what? Take the day off. Take the day off and listen to the show and get through all the back episodes. How about that? Yeah, but very kind words. So thank you for that, Rachel. And it brings me to something that I want to say, actually, is that if you are enjoying the show, if you have listened to a few episodes, if you've listened to all the episodes and you like the show, tell someone. It'd be so cool if you did that. And it would help the show. It would help me. And it would, of course, mean a lot to me if you did that. And it could be that you just tell a friend. Maybe you're sitting next to someone right now. Just look over and see, could they be interested in a show called The Germany Experience? You know, maybe take off your headphones and say, hey, you know what I'm listening to? It's a show called The Germany Experience. You want to listen? Or it could be that you share it on your social media. You tweet about it or you put it on Instagram. Whatever you do, I would love for you to get the word out there about the show. That would be wonderful. That would be great if you did that. I would appreciate that. Anyway, by the way, something else I wanted to tell you is that I don't know if you remember a few episodes ago, I interviewed Vlad from Romania. The episode was episode 18 and it was called The Why Has to Be Right. Now, Vlad at the time mentioned to me that he was thinking about starting a podcast and he's done it. He's started a podcast. So that's up and running and it's called The Diaspora Cast. And it's in Romanian, as far as I know. So if you can speak Romanian and you want to listen to a podcast about life in Germany, about the expat life, then look for Diaspora Cast by Vlad. So yeah, speaking of podcasters, that brings us to this week's guest, who's also a podcaster. As I said earlier, she's the host of The Expat Experience. And in our discussion, we talk about how she ended up in Germany. We talk about the experiences she's had learning the language. And also we discuss making friends in Germany. Her name is Amy, and here's our conversation that we had. With me on the show, I have Amy from Canada, who is a brand new expat podcaster in Germany. Your podcast is called The Expat Experience, and it's pretty new, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I only just started it a few short months ago and it's continuing into its second season now.
Yeah. It's a bit awkward because I've recently decided to rename my podcast and my podcast is now called The Germany Experience. So it's a little awkward, but anyway, that's the way it goes, I suppose. I have to let you know that it's only fair that I have a habit of making anyone who is an expat podcaster in Germany my rival. So,
okay.
I guess from now on, you and I are enemies.
All right. So it's not even friendly competition. It's just combative.
Come on, Amy. Friendly competition. Nicole from the Expat Cast knows this. I think, you know her. And we had a charity challenge back in December, and you were kind enough to put our promo on that. So I guess there might be some friendliness there. I guess we have to be friendly and amicable.
We have to be.
If we must be. You're originally from Canada, and you're now living in Hamburg.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think of Hamburg?
I think it's wonderful. It's actually been, my third city abroad for living. And it's honestly the best experience that I've had. Okay. The people are much friendlier and more open than I expected coming here. Right. It's the kind of city that has something for everybody, for sure. So there's an entire kind of alternative scene here. So if you love to go to concerts, I know some of my friends who are metalheads that love Hamburg because of all the shows here. If you like street art, if you're into that kind of stuff, there's definitely there are definitely pockets in the city for that. But if you're a little more posh and high end and you like luxury fashion. There's also that too, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So it's a versatile city.
Yeah. I fell in love with it. I was there for 2 days, like literally 2 days, and I just thought this place is
Hmm.
fantastic. I need to go back there. It is really, really a cool place.
Were you in like the Jungfishsteg area, like right where the water is?
Yeah, where the water is, and then I think there's an area called Hafenstadt or something like that, and then I
Oh yeah, Hafen
wandered around there.
City. Yeah,
What is
Hafenstadt.
that
Yeah.
opera building called?
Oh, Elbphilharmonie.
Yeah, that was such a weird building to see. So I was in that area just wandering around, and then also just a little bit further up. And it was, but I will say it was the middle of winter, so there was a very chilly breeze coming off the water, and that was not entirely
Ooh.
pleasant. But even despite that, it was fantastic.
Yeah, the first time I saw the Elbphilharmonie, like when I first arrived in Hamburg and I was living out of a hostel for the first couple of weeks,
Yeah.
that was one of the first attractions that I went to visit, not inside, but just around the area. And my first thought was, this looks like a very posh villain's headquarters.
Yes, it does. It looks like a Bond, super villain works
Very
there.
much, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like 21st century,
Yeah, I'd expect like the alligator pits at the bottom levels and so on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned that you were in a hostel, so I want to get to that.
Sure.
How you ended up in Hamburg, but let's take a step back a bit and
Mm-hmm.
go. This is not your first expat experience, as you mentioned earlier. So tell me where you've been before and how you got here.
Okay. Sure. So my first gig abroad was in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. And in hindsight, when I tell a lot of people that, their reaction is, whoa.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, it's actually more understandable why they have that reaction, because if you watch any videos or even just look at photos of the city, you realize just how congested it is with motorbikes, and it's a very fast pace of life. But at the same time, Vietnamese culture, at least in that city, is not as chaotic in the way that we conceive of chaos, like say in like a New York or even a Toronto or Vancouver. It's more of just like the traffic is crazy, but when it comes to work culture, it's not necessarily as intense as that. So I first went there to earn my teaching certificate. So I worked as a teacher there.
Right. Why did you go
And
there to get your teaching certificate?
yeah, so there was a program that was being offered. So it's for the TESOL certificate. So
Right.
I went there for like a month-long course. So they also provide accommodation and all that stuff, or it's part of your fee when you apply and get accepted. So I stayed in one of the houses with a few other fellow expats, I guess you could say. And so we just did the studying part for a month, and they also help you with placements in the city. So if you want to find teaching jobs right away directly in Ho Chi Minh, which is what most people did it for, they'll help you find the best jobs.
Is that what you did it for?
Yeah, that was my main reason for doing it.
So you
Yeah.
specifically wanted to get a job there?
Yeah, I figured it was a good place to start because there are some countries, for when it comes to teaching overseas, that are a lot more competitive now and want more years of experience. So if you're just starting out, Southeast Asia is usually a good place to go. So some people will go to Thailand or even Cambodia too, Vietnam, but Vietnam's very popular. It's a popular choice now. So I did that. And I got to really travel around Asia more than I ever did previously. So I had visited Cambodia, Malaysia, and Japan all within a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty chaotic in the best way. Then I went back home for a little bit and I accepted a job in China. So I moved to Shenzhen a couple months later and started working in adult teaching and pedagogy there, which was a really great experience. But living in China is definitely, and again, I have to reiterate, this is the mainland. So it's not Hong Kong, it's not Taiwan, it's China, like Red China. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of adjustment that you have to make living there, that even people from neighboring countries who are expats there don't always stick around because it's very tough to stick it out there.
How long were you there for?
I made it the full year to the end of my
Okay.
contract. But I got a bit derailed actually because I had accepted a job in Shanghai. So I was supposed to move there and start working there. But the company messed up my visa.
Oh,
And yeah, for just incompetence is really, if I can just be perfectly honest, that's exactly what it was. They didn't seem to understand exactly what the government office wanted from them. So they kept asking me for paperwork I had already given them,
right.
and that the photo requirements were different all of a sudden. Like things just kept
Uh,
changing all the time. So they said, well, give us another 4 to 6 weeks. Well, I thought I'd be working by now. So
yeah,
there was a lot of that I just decided, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm just going to go back home.
right.
So I did that and I started freelancing, and I also started my degree. So I was pretty busy with that. And after about a year of doing that, I started making preparations to move to Germany. So that's how I ended up here.
Okay, so the question I have to ask is why? Okay, before I get to why Germany,
Mhm.
maybe another question that I want to ask you is why the serial expatism?
Yeah,
What
it
has
is a
been
good question.
what has been driving you? Because you could have just stayed in Canada. Which city did you say you were from? You're from
Toronto.
Toronto. You could have just stayed there and found a normal job there. But instead you went to Vietnam and then you went to China and yeah, and then eventually Germany. So what is driving you? What is making you make those decisions?
Oh, that's like the heart of my life story right there. This is
Uh-huh.
great.
All right.
So
Getting to the bottom of things here.
yeah, no, it's really great because I so rarely ever get to dive deep into that.
Okay, and
Um,
that's all the time we
s-
have for today, folks.
okay, fin and screen.
No, sorry, I apologize for
That's
interrupting. Go
okay.
ahead.
No, I was just thinking that the TLDR version, I guess you could say, is that I went to grad school previously and I studied public policy. I worked in the public sector for a couple of years, and it was some of the most, I don't know, it was kind of deflating, I guess, because what I thought it would be turned out to not be even close. So it's one of those classic cases of, studying something and then realizing that working in it is a completely different story.
Yeah.
Even though I did have some really great contracts, it's hard to actually get that security, and it's hard to, because in Toronto, it doesn't matter what kind of job it is, contracts are the norm, and contracts can be like 6 months or shorter in a lot of
Okay.
cases.
Right.
So you're kind of forced to bounce around a certain amount.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is, yeah. So when you're trying to, build your savings or trying to, even just stay in one stable place, even if that is what you want, it's
Yeah.
pretty tough to do.
Yeah.
Um, so I got a little bit fed up with that, and I kept feeling the itch to travel. So there were times even during, like downtime at work, if I wasn't doing anything, I would spend that time quite literally daydreaming about where I wanted to visit.
Yeah.
And that would just be as a tourist.
Right.
So
Did you do
actually,
any traveling at that time as well?
not no, I didn't have the
Just in your
time
mind.
actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
and funds were not as sufficient as I would have liked because when you're bouncing from contract to contract, it's hard to save as much as you need
Yeah.
to travel and to kind of enjoy yourself. And while I was in school, my entire life during that time was the work study grind. So I was in school full time and I was working part time and volunteering. So I had a lot going on for a good like 6 or 7 years of my life,
Right.
basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So throughout that whole time, I just kept thinking, God, when am I going to get to be able to do this?
Yeah.
And after my last contract that I was really dissatisfied with, I just said, you know what? Why am I settling for
Mm-hmm.
less? Like I
Mm-hmm.
can go somewhere else, I can have a different experience. And the original plan was just do it for a year and see what happens. But like many others, I got the bug. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
realized,
That
wait, there's a
very
whole world out there?
Yeah. Yeah. Where else can I go?
Right, exactly. So after I decided, Vietnam wasn't really where I wanted to be for longer than a year, I wanted to give another country in Asia a try. So
Mm.
the original plan was to try for Korea, but the recruiter that I spoke to actually said, well, actually, you'd be in higher demand in China, so maybe you can try that. And I did. And professionally, it was actually one of the best moves I ever made. So it worked out really well.
All right. So then you came back to Toronto, you were living there, and then you decided that you wanted to go to Germany.
Yes.
How does your family react when you keep telling them that you're going to a different place every like 2 years or so? You say, I'm off to China now, and now I'm off to Germany. Are they coming to terms with the fact that you're just not around, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only aspect of it that's a little difficult for them is that I'm their only child.
Oh,
So they don't
that's very
have.
irresponsible, Amy.
I know, I'm so selfish. But they don't have another person to kind of, worry about it,
Yeah.
and to like face to face have someone that they can be like, "Hey, what are you doing with your
Yeah,
life?"
sure.
No, in my parents' case, they're quite liberal about these things, and I think what also helps them to embrace this is that my mom's cousin has pretty much lived a life like this. He's been living in Hong Kong for like 40 years.
Right.
And so he stayed put, but he travels all the time. And so when they learned that this was kind of the lifestyle that I wanted to have for however long it would last,
Yeah.
they just thought, well, cousin Johnny made a great living and he
Yeah.
seems to be enjoying himself. So
Thank God for cousin Johnny, right?
yeah, pretty much. And if he
He
hears
paved the
this,
way for
shout
you.
out. No, he did. He did. And actually, my mom even told me very recently when she spoke to him that he took a little bit of credit. He was like, "Oh, she's following in my footsteps, huh?" Because not
That's
a lot of people in our family are doing this, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
So
but they're
that's
very supportive. Yeah.
what was the reason for Germany, and what did you want to do there or here?
Yeah. Yeah. Here now. So I was kind of tired of Asia at that point because like I had worked in two of the countries there and I did a lot of traveling throughout Asia, and I'm not completely done with the continent yet, but
Mm-hmm.
insofar as working, I just felt like, this is a little too incompatible, I think.
Okay.
So I took that experience, took all the good that came with it, and the freelancing was great back home because it gave me a lot of perspective in terms of where I wanted my career to go. And I really thought that I would end up maybe working somewhere like the Czech Republic or looking into Eastern Europe because the visa requirements weren't as strict as parts of Western or even Northern Europe were concerned. But I really had my heart set on Germany because I'm part ethnically German myself.
Okay.
And it was a language that I always entertained the idea of learning, but never really got around to. And just to feel, a little more connected, a little more at ease, and,
Yeah.
and live somewhere where I'm not spectated at as a visible foreigner. Because here, no one cares. I look like everybody else,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And professionally, I'm on a very niche visa known as the Visum für Freiberufler or the freelancer visa.
Okay.
And I think the last time I checked, I think it's like less than 1% of all foreigners coming into Germany have that visa. So
Wow.
it's very, very niche.
Yeah.
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 And the reason I wanted to do that is because I still wanted to work in like learning and development. So I do a mix of like corporate training, I do some private teaching on the side, and I also do e-learning design and development. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where my career is going at this point.
Okay.
And the freelancer visa allowed me to pursue, multiple companies, multiple projects all at the same time
Yeah.
instead of just one company, one fixed job. So
Okay.
that was the motivation for doing that.
Oh, that's quite interesting. A few episodes ago, I had James from Live Work Germany on to talk about exactly the freelance visa. So it's interesting that you say that you're here. Now, you're still on that, right?
I am, yes.
Do you end up working at home a lot, or do you go into offices somewhere?
Yeah, so for more of the training work, a lot of it is on site. So I
Right.
actually go to the companies and I, do my thing, usually from, I don't know, it could be as short as an hour to as long as an hour and a half or two.
Mm-hmm.
So it really just depends on the client and what their needs are.
Yeah.
But as you say, I get to work with a lot of different companies. So I have like a media company, a real estate company, a pharmaceutical company. So it really kind of runs the gamut.
Yeah.
Insofar as the e-learning aspect of my work is concerned, a lot of that I can quite literally do from my laptop. So if I
Yeah.
wanted to work from home, I can. But I find that if I just stay at home, I don't get much done. I get distracted. So
Okay.
I force myself to kind of cafe hop a little bit. And I
Right.
like the vibe. So
Yeah.
I like to just go zone out, work for a solid like 4 hours at a time,
Yeah.
and then maybe go to another training later in the day or whatever my schedule happens to be. So it's very flexible.
That sounds like a very cool lifestyle, actually. But is there a lot of uncertainty that comes with it, or have you built up enough of a client base now not to worry too much about where the checks are going to come from?
Yeah. So in terms of financial security, I'm not worried because I have, especially on the training side, it's very stable at this point. So they often renew the contracts and they want
Okay.
me to keep being their trainer, which is great. Um, but at the same time, when you're first building it up, like when your visa is first issued to you, that's when it's the hardest, I think, because no one knows you yet. So you have to really put yourself out there. And in my case, I do have some intermediary companies that put me in touch with potential clients. Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been in Germany now?
Oh, I arrived in July.
Oh, so
So
you're fresh. That's like 7 months, 7 months in
yeah.
Germany.
Hmm.
Okay, so now you're in Hamburg and you've been here for 7 months. What are your first impressions of Germany? How has it been sort of integrating into friendship circles and into the culture?
Yeah. So when it comes to friendships, I hate to admit this, but I'm at this point, I'm still kind of in the expat bubble to a
Yeah,
certain degree.
but I think that's
Um,
natural as well.
It is, yeah. And it's not because I don't feel comfortable interacting with Germans or anything like that. In fact, I actually find, at least with hamburgers, they're actually quite friendly people for the
Hmm.
most part.
Hmm.
But I find that it just has to do with how they perceive friendship, right? So
Yeah,
someone I've known maybe a few months and I think is quite interesting and very affable and easy to get along with, I would consider them a friend, even if it's more of a casual friend, but they
yeah,
wouldn't see it that way. They
no,
see you as more of an acquaintance up until
exactly.
maybe, yeah, like 2 years or something. So, in
Yeah,
that sense, it's a little tough because as much as I respect that approach and that view, as an expat, that's challenging because you don't know how long you're going to be in a place. And if it takes that long to forge what they consider to be a friendship, then you don't know if they're going to keep in touch with you if you leave or,
yeah,
just what the nature of your relationship really is. So that's a bit tough. So most of my German acquaintances, I guess I'll have to call them that, are people I met primarily through my work. And most of them vary in ages as well. Like I have some that are doing their apprenticeships. So they're as young as like 21, 22. And then I've met people in their 40s and 50s who have offered to, show me around the city and have a relationship outside of work and that kind of stuff. So it's been a mixed experience, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. I think work is a good place to meet Germans and make friends with Germans because that's where my first German friends came from. Either my wife's colleagues or colleagues that I was directly working with on a daily basis because they're forced to get to know you. They're
Yeah.
forced to interact with you. I had a guy who became my friend later on, and still years later is still one of my best friends here in Germany. But the only reason we became friends was because we sat in the same office together, staring at each other over our monitors. And when you do that every day, you just have to become friends with each other. You don't, it's kind of, it doesn't matter who you are. So you kind of force them. But yeah, it's difficult outside of the office to meet and become friends with Germans.
It is, yeah. And to be fair, coming from my city of Toronto, it's actually pretty similar in that way. Although I don't think it takes as long for someone to consider you a friend, but in
Yeah.
terms of getting that first interaction that doesn't seem weird or forced
Yeah.
is also very difficult. It's like
Really?
people, yeah,
It's,
and
it's
I'm
not how you
guilty of this.
perceive Toronto, basically, or Canada. It's not, it wouldn't be the way I would think about it.
No, you wouldn't think so, but
No.
Torontonians are pretty closed off, and I think
Okay.
that's because it's such a hustle and bustle city and it's highly competitive, like from
Hmm.
an economic perspective, and it is kind of one of the major hubs of the country. So
Yeah.
a lot of the chaos and anxiety is rooted there, right?
Right.
And
Right.
people are just trying to get on with their day, and the cost of living is so high, so people are just stressed out a lot
Yeah.
of the time. And
Yeah.
we tend to assume that if a stranger is talking to us, they're a serial killer. And I am guilty of this too. So even when I
Not being
came
a serial killer,
here,
obviously, people. She's not being
yeah,
that. Just to be clear.
yeah,
I want to be
just
clear.
to be clear, yes.
Well, as far as we know, I've just met you, Amy, so I actually can't say you're not a serial killer, but I don't think that's what she
Well,
means.
yeah, this is true. Yeah, you have no idea who you're really
I
talking
do
to.
not. I do not. This is getting weird. I'm freaked out now.
You'll get used to it. You'll learn to love it, actually. But yeah, Torontonians are quite closed off in that way, and
Okay.
and I'm part of that too. So I'm not saying that as a like,
Mm,
oh, I'm so much better than that. I'm more open. No, I do the exact same thing.
yeah.
So here, when people greet you, even people who don't know you, like if I'm walking through a client company and then I see people and they're just like, oh, moin, guten Tag. It's like, oh, acknowledgement.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
And I
just
don't
saying
even
hi.
work with them. It's
Okay.
nice.
Yeah. So other than that, what about the language? How's your level of German?
Yeah, so my German's improved a lot actually since moving here, which I guess wouldn't really be surprising to
Yeah.
anybody. But I started learning just through like Duolingo and online resources. So I was
Hmm.
pretty much teaching myself for free.
Okay.
And it was nice because before I took an intensive course here, I actually got to skip um, a few of like I guess they're like sub levels. So actually learning for free actually put me ahead a little bit, which was
So,
really nice.
so that's interesting. How would you approach learning with Duolingo? Because I've never used it. So would you sit down for an X amount of time every day with the app or with the browser, or how does learning with Duolingo actually work?
Yeah, so you can use the app or the browser. I used the browser more often because it was more convenient, and there are certain learning features that are easier to access if you use the browser as
Yeah.
opposed to the app. Um, so I found it to be, it sets a really good foundation more than anything else. And
Right.
they do include some funny sentences here and there. One of the things I remember seeing that I was like, oh, you guys are clever. That's cute. Was they had a sentence that was pretty much like, I guess, one of the lyrics or one of the lines from Billie Jean by Michael
Okay.
Jackson.
Okay.
And so when I was reading it, you had to write in English what the meaning was. And I was like, but the kid is not my son. I was like,
Like, oh,
oh,
well
that's
played,
cute, Duolingo.
Duolingo.
Well done. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So once I started actually like understanding what I was reading, then I was like, okay, so my comprehension's getting better. That's great.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I came to Germany and I was forced into situations where, you have to order something in German or you have
Yeah.
to ask a question, then that started to improve. I'd say my biggest weakness is listening. Like sometimes I don't fully, like I'll pick up certain words, but if they're using a structure I'm not familiar with, or if there's some German words are extremely long. So
Yeah.
if they say it really fast, I'm just like, something about this.
Yeah.
And you don't want me to do it. Like, so
That's what
there
I'm
might
getting.
be
That's the vibe I'm getting right now.
yeah, exactly. So, but even when I was learning Mandarin in China, I had the same problem. Like I could look at something on a piece of paper and I know what the meaning is, and I
Yeah.
could even write it or say it. But when I hear it, I don't always hear it the way, I don't know, that I expect to,
Mm.
or necessarily in the same structure that I had learned it in. So I'm getting used to that more adaptive,
Yeah. And I,
communication style, right?
and I think that is a big thing. It's one thing to learn the language and the grammar structures and everything, but it's another thing to talk it. It's a completely different
Yeah.
thing because people are speaking faster when they're conversing. They're using a lot more cultural references. They're using a lot more lingo or colloquialisms, let's put it that way, that you don't learn on those kinds of apps. And Germany has the added problem of a lot of areas having a dialect. I don't think that Hamburg has a dialect, right?
Not that I'm aware of. I think
I
it's
think it's
pretty
Hochdeutsch
standard.
there. Yeah, I think it's pretty much. But still,
Yeah.
everyone has their own ways of using the language, and that's the difficult part: is following a conversation in an everyday setting.
Yeah, so that's something I'm slowly getting used to, and I find that the best method is like listening to podcasts or just sometimes I'll let ads run on YouTube, even if the product doesn't interest me at all.
Don't
And
do
it's
that,
also
Amy. You're
just
encouraging them. Don't do that.
I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
It's for the sake of language
yeah,
acquisition.
for
It's
learning, for learning.
justified. Yeah.
Some marketing assistant is sitting there in 11 o'clock at night trying to figure out the statistics. I'm like, what is she watching all of these German videos for? It's for educational language purposes, people.
No, but it's actually helped me so much
Okay.
because I'll sit and listen to like, oh, this product is being discounted by 50%. Get it before Monday, kind of thing, and that helps me. That helps me a lot, and
Yeah.
I don't even have to read the text. So I'm getting a lot more acclimated to just hearing it as it's normally spoken, rather than just in
Yeah.
scripted educational context, right?
But now that you say that, that's actually a very good point. It might be some good advice for people because I think commercials are done, first of all, in Hochdeutsch, and they're done slowly and clearly because that's the nature of advertising that people wanted to be understood. So that could well be a good advice to tell people to watch German adverts.
Yeah, or any sort of kind of entertainment that's easier to understand. So
Yeah.
maybe not like a TV series or something like that, but
Yeah.
something that's helped me quite a bit. And I mentioned this with another guest on my podcast was music.
Mm,
So I'm actually a huge fan of German alternative music. So
okay.
I grew up with it. I still listen to it. And what I've done is I'll actually take the lyrics in German and see how much I can understand
Right.
just at first glance. And then whatever I don't, I just look up and then I'm able to glean the meaning from it. And I
Yeah.
appreciate it on a whole different level than I did before.
Yeah. And that's a good way of doing it because it's also kind of poetic and a lot of idioms and things like that would come out of that. So you'd also be learning idiomatic expressions, which is the other difficult
Right.
thing about learning and understanding German is that in a conversational aspect is quite often the idioms will go way over my head. So I think that's good advice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Uh,
so I think that coupled with, even some free resources would make a good foundation.
yeah.
I think for studying at the higher levels, maybe you would have to invest, in proper tutoring or a course or something like that.
Hmm.
But if you can, keep the costs down for as long as possible, I think that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're fitting in slowly making friends. You're learning the language. What are your plans here in Germany now? Is this another temporary stop in the Amy serial expatism way of life, or does it have the potential to be more than just a stop, or are you not even thinking that far at this point?
It's a really good question. And I think for some of the people listening, they might be shocked because they don't know what my answer to this is. But, I have tried throughout kind of my serial expat journey to maybe find a place to stay longer than just, 6 months to a year. But I haven't really found it. And to
Okay.
be honest, I don't think I found it here either. It's not because I don't like it. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
because I don't feel like I belong. It's none of that.
Hmm.
At this point, there's a lot just kind of happening internally for me,
Okay.
like where I want my career to go and what kind of lifestyle. Like I just turned 30 last month, so it does kind of shift your perspective a little bit when you're thinking, oh wow, it's the next decade, right? So you're
Yeah.
trying to think, where do you really want to go and where do you want to be? And I spent the latter half of my 20s basically living in three distinct places,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought, is this really what I want to do into my 30s? Or do I want to kind of plant my roots again, kind of be closer to family and friends
Right.
back home? So that's kind of the direction I'm leaning in at this point. But I never say never. If I do go abroad again, it would probably be in the e-learning and L&D field for sure.
Okay. Okay.
But I would probably move somewhere like maybe New Zealand or Scotland or just somewhere with really
Okay.
nice scenery, I
Yeah.
guess.
And how do you know when it's time to move on? Is it in the past when you were either there for a specific amount of time and you decided that you're not going to stay? This is a bit more open ended. Is there anything that you're waiting on where you'll know? Okay, now it's time to go, or do you have a set time in your mind or something like that?
I find a lot of it's just very intuitive.
Okay,
Like I just
you know
kind
when the
of like,
time comes.
yeah, like I think one of the most valuable things you can have as an expat is self-awareness.
Hmm.
So to be able to look inward and assess why you're feeling the way you do and that kind of thing. And I'm not easily deterred. I mean, I've been through, bureaucratic nonsense in different countries, not just in Germany,
Right. Right.
and that sort of thing. So that things like that don't make me think, I throw my hands up and give up. It's usually never anything like that, or else I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be pursuing this for a third time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I would say that it usually just comes from a place of just trying to assess like long term where I want to be, especially professionally. Where do I
Yeah.
want to go? What do I
Yeah.
want to do? And if that leads me somewhere else, I just kind of let it lead me somewhere else. And
Yeah.
I find with the variation, there, of course, there's the disadvantage of not kind of planting your roots and building more of a community where you are. But at the same time, I also feel like because I did it at the time of my life that I did, they were such formative experiences for me that
Mm.
even if I go back home and never went abroad again, I would still have that under my belt.
Yeah.
Like no one can take that from
Yeah.
me at that point, right?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the advantages of this kind of thing of living as as a foreigner in a foreign country, is that you do get those experiences and insight that you do not get staying at home. It's just an incredible mind shifting experience. And one of the other advantages is something that you said as well, is that you do develop more of an ability to look inside yourself and understand a bit better what's going on. I think being an expat helps with that as well.
For sure. You can assess better, why are you feeling the way you do right now?
Yeah.
And the lowest points I'd say that I've had here have mostly been, just things that would have gotten under my skin no matter where I'm at. So
Yeah.
it's not specific to my locale or the
Okay.
country that I'm in now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not anything like that. It's Although I can't say that was the case for Asia, but that's a story for another time, I guess.
Right.
You're able to assess, what's external and what's internal, and
Yeah.
why things are affecting you the way that they are. So, for instance, I can use one example from China. It's very common, even in major cities, to, like I said, be spectated at or to, because you stand out
Yeah.
physically, right? And I wouldn't mind that so much if I wasn't being secretly photographed all the time,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
if I was approached for a photo and I refused, I would be stared down and treated like I was the worst human being alive. And especially, I didn't experience this personally, obviously, because I'm Caucasian, but, I made friends in China that were, Black or South Asian or just like darker skinned, and they dealt with so much racism, and a lot of it's very blatant. So even just being around that is a bit much, and they're not subtle about it either. So
Really.
there's quite a bit of that too. Oh yeah, it's rough. But coming here was so refreshing because it felt more cosmopolitan, I guess, and it
Yeah.
was a little more reminiscent of my home city, but with some added advantages that
Okay.
my home city didn't have.
Yeah, but I think that also depends where in Germany you are. I know that on the whole it is
Yeah.
very cosmopolitan and very integrated, but there are also areas where it's a little more difficult, at least from what I've heard. So home is an option then still, Toronto.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And like I said, I'm very close with my family,
Mm,
and I always keep in touch with the same friends back home that will, hit me up for a Facebook call, or we'll do Skype or whatever's easiest for them.
yeah,
And even friends of mine that are still abroad, we communicate no matter what time zone
right.
I'm in or what they happen to be in. So it's just, I do get that sense sometimes where I'm like, I don't really want to keep separating myself
Yeah,
from people.
yeah,
And I think that's more of the harder emotional side of things is,
yeah.
do I want to keep putting myself in a position where I'm always away from the people that I love and that are closest to me? That's
Mhm.
probably one of the hardest things.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Amy, before we finish, just tell me about the podcast. It's called The Expat Experience, and just give me the elevator pitch, what it's about, what people can expect if they tune in.
Sure. So if you graciously tune into my podcast, you will hear the stories of other people who are expats and digital nomads. Some are even entrepreneurs. There's a whole slew of professions and countries and regions represented, where you can hear all about the blessings and the blunders of expat life, the challenges and the highlights and everything in between.
Damn, that was a good elevator pitch. I need to work on mine. This is,
I totally improvised that, but thank you.
That was very, very. I'm like, what? I need to cancel this, throw this away, and start anew. That was amazing.
No, definitely not. No, I love your podcast. Actually, yours and Nicole's were the first that I had the chance to listen to about Germany, but I didn't discover them until after I came here. So
my last question is usually, what is the one bit of advice that you can offer new expats coming to Germany or foreigners coming to Germany? The one bit of advice that you can give them that will make things a bit easier for them.
Good question. I'm inclined to say that be prepared for the bureaucracy. I know I've mentioned that a few times throughout this recording, but I can't reiterate enough just how bureaucratic Germany really is. And everything you can conceivably do to make sure that you have a prepared application is going to be in your favor. Sometimes even if the clerk is just having a bad day and you're missing something that might not even be essential, but they'd prefer to have, maybe they just decide, you know what, you don't get your visa.
Yeah.
So it's best to just be as thorough as humanly possible. Germans are all about efficiency. And if you can demonstrate that and be on your A game and be on top of what you need to have, that's the best advice I can give for here, for this country anyway.
That's pretty good advice. Where can people find you, Amy?
So you can find me on the Expat Experience on Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts. You can also find me on Instagram at the.expat.experience. And you can also find the Facebook group, the Expat Experience, or rather page, the Facebook page for the podcast as well. So that's where you can find me.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time, Amy, and all the best for your show going forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. And by the way, I don't mind that our titles will be similar, so feel free.
I thought I was going to have some kind of lawsuit on my hands here.
No.
That's it for another episode of the Germany Experience. You can find all the links to Amy's show and her contact details in the show notes. And I'll give you a little sneak preview into next week's episode. You might have noticed this time of year, it's carnival time or Fasching or whatever you want to call it. And things get a little bit weird around about this time. There's a lot of people dressing up, a lot of people going to all kinds of parties. And to be honest, I've been here for over 10 years and I didn't really fully understand what the full Fasching experience is about. It just seems to be something that goes on for ages. So I sat down with a real life German and we talk about what Carnival is about, and she tells us some fun stories she's had celebrating Carnival in the past. We'll get to that next week. Tune in. Episode will be in your feeds next Monday. Music in this episode, theme song by my band, 10 Cent Janes. Other music in the episode, Until the End by Ryan Anderson. I'm out. Auf Wiederhören.